Vonhawk. I'm a conservator of rare art. I conserve paintings and works of art on paper. I'm also the person who restored this entire collection of rare and valuable war posters that you're about to view. But first I'd like to take you to my lab where the posters are being restored and show you the entire process of conservation that saved this wonderful collection. This is a piece we'll be working on, and it's one of the collection. It's one of the American posters. It has some issues with it, so that we'll be addressing. The first is that, like most of the posters in this collection, they are framed and coated with an acetate cover. And acetate is very acidic, and it will destroy artwork. So what I'll be doing is first removing this cover. Then it'll be laid out, and I'll be addressing damages with photography so that we can keep track of what the restorations are going to be like. And also bearing in mind that this is a historic piece, we have to make sure that we document damages along the way of its lifetime. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be flipping it, and then you can see it has a backing board that's acidic, and masking tape was used to hold the acetate onto the piece itself. So, and you can see how extremely brittle it is. It just basically will pull right off. And instead of using blades on this piece, I'm going to try to just do it with my hands so that I make sure that nothing will slip and hurt the artwork. And all I'm going to be doing is releasing the board itself from the artwork. Is just sitting in there, so all I really have to do is just take the acetate off. And you don't have to care about that. This is masking tape, which is also horrible to the artwork. You can see the way it just completely pulls off because it's so acidic. It's very, 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 very brittle. Make sure all the corners are gone. The paper itself has been degraded because of the acidic cover that it has had on it. So there's going to be areas where the piece is actually going to have to be relined, or lined once with Japanese papers, because the paper is, the original artwork is, if I find that it's too weak to hold the hinges so that it can be properly framed, I need to make sure that the art is strong enough to be able to stand on its own so that it can handle hinges. This is about the end of it. You always know it's acetate when it rips, and also you can hear the sound of it. That's a real dead giveaway that it's acidic. You want to make sure that these are all pulled down so that when we pull the artwork out, you don't catch on anything. That's good. I don't have to use any blades on this. This is the piece of art now with the acetate removed from it, and you can see, actually the paper is really nice. It's very strong, has a lot of luff to it, it's called. You can really shift it around. So the paper is not as brittle as I thought it was going to be. That's really, really good. And in this case, I'm probably going to be just doing a lining around the edges of the piece because of all the tears all around these edges, these tears. This brown area in here is a water stain, and those occur when the art was sitting somewhere and water was wicked up from a container, or usually these were all in rolls at an early date, and the water rolls up into the art, and those are actually the residue of dirt and any kind of contents in the paper kind of sequesters into the wettest area. The museum that we're working with, Cornell, we were very careful when we wanted to do the restoration on this collection. We don't want these to look brand new because they've had so much history behind them. We want everyone to know that they've had a life, and that, you know, sometimes lives are rough, especially with all these pieces of paper. And sitting down with Cornell, we made a determination that the pieces will be restored to the point where the viewer could enjoy the entire image. But we were not going to address tiny flaws, because then we start making the pieces look like they're reproduction pieces. So things like a lot of these little creases will be laid down because you can see all the past repairs that were on the piece. I'm going to flip it over. These are all inappropriate repairs. These are linen tape. They're water activated, so someone probably licked them and then laid them on all of these because they are either creases, which is, you know, really nice crease, or there were tears, a lot of tears, or see the edges got very, very fragile. This is a clay paper. That's why it's got that nice shiny look to it, and it also accepts printer's inks very, very well. They become very, very bright, vibrant, so printers love using them. Nice, nice paper. This end you can see is dirtier because the roll was rolled up this way, and this was actually the outside edge that was attached to the environment, could attack it. And then, of course, now you see the water stain probably was a drip straight down from a wall. And then you can also see the red is actually a migration of some of the colors. So we know now that this was wet for a lengthy period of time in order to get inks to kind of move and shift around. And we see now we see areas where there were some insect damages and some insects lived here. We see some body parts, we see fecal material. This is what normally happens. Here are some areas here where bugs have actually chewed. These are cockroaches that have actually chewed onto the piece. And what I'll be doing is addressing all of these repairs. They all have to be removed. And then the pieces will be surface cleaned by dry methods. And then we build the treatment sequence after that. See where we stand. I can see a bunch of tears way back up into here that we'll have to work with at this point. All these creases will be relaxed. They'll be relaxed with Japanese rolling beads, which are semi-precious stones that are strung and made in a circle and laid flat under your palm, and then as you roll it over creased areas, you're pushing the fibers back into place of the paper. So, and that's the gentle way of doing it, to addressing a lot of these damages. So that's what we do first. Now the flip side has a lot of dirt on the surface as well. It's partially why we have water stains. So I think actually first, before I address the back, I think I'm going to be doing a surface cleaning treatment on the piece itself. So the first thing I need to do now is actually get a camera and photograph the damage is so we can document it for the future. I use a digital, and it is all hard copied for a file for each one of each one of these pieces of artwork has its own file of hard copies, and then it also has, of course, a digital file. And I'll go through this, and I'll actually photograph even the minutest damages, like all these losses, all these tears. Everything needs to be documented before I get started on the artwork. Next thing I'm going to be doing is I've decided not to address these men's at this time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to be doing a surface clean, and I'm going to be doing it, it's called with dry methods. And the material that I use is a powder that I have especially blended, and especially blended, it has no pumice in it, it's very, very soft. And it has no plasticizers in it that you would find in a normal eraser, like a gum eraser. If you can see, it's got a lot of pink in it, and that's because of the different rubbers that are used in it. So we don't have to be afraid of any staining. And I use my bare hands instead of using a gloves because first of all, your hands are rolling on top of the powder, so they're not really touching the artwork, and secondly, I can feel with my fingers in case there's something rough underneath the surface that might pop through the paper, or I can tell if I'm pushing too hard. And you'll start seeing how this is going to start getting darker. And first I'm rubbing it over the areas that we're afraid might be weak because of the water stain, which is this red. And as you can see, the red is not being pushed at all by this beautiful, beautiful grinding of eraser material. And then you can see it's already looking cleaner. So I'm just going to continue to the entire piece. And I'm not really worried about any other contaminants from my hands, but as you can see, I'm starting to pick up more dirt. You can see the colors are starting to change. And now that I come back here on the white, you can start seeing the dirt that's coming off the surface. You have to be kind of careful because you don't know right now how fragile these inks are. Since I've just started working on the piece, I'm starting to understand the materials, and I have to be sure that when I'm dry cleaning it that I'm not pulling any colors off, that the surface is strong enough to take care of this. Now, in other adjustments for the cleaning of this, one of the things that we discussed was actually to remove these water stains, the piece would have to be totally submerged. And I do a lot of total submersions just in water. No bleaches are ever used, no toxins are ever used. But that was one of the options that was put forth for the administration of this collection, and they, and rightly so, and I agree with them that this stain really wasn't that offensive, and that since we want the piece to look old anyway, it doesn't need to be addressed as long as it's not causing any damage to the paper itself. And it's not. It's pretty stable, which is nice because I never over-conserve any of my pieces. So that just means that this piece will not be totally submerged. It's going to be dry cleaned And then if there's any outstanding stains anywhere, they will be addressed locally. And that might be just addressed locally. And as you can see, just use the palm of your hand. You start seeing that the pink clays are starting to get a little bit dirtier, a little bit darker. And believe it or not, it will make a huge difference after this is cleaned off. You'll see a big change. What I'm actually doing is when you take off a lot of grime, it's kind of an oily grime from just environmental dirt. And since these are nice clay papers, once you remove that film, it's like a grimy film, the paper is going to start to have a nice, shiny, healthy surface again. It'll have a nice shine to it. And the artist that executed this work actually they're essential in actually doing their materials as well. So the whole idea of a nice, shiny paper to show off all these beautiful inks was very, very important to them. So you always go back to the artist's intent, and the artist's intent in this case was not a matte surface. It was a nice, really healthy, shiny surface where the inks could pop. Because the whole idea, of course, is to attract a lot of attention. That's all you do. Something like that, and then it's a little baby brush. Really soft brush. And you're going to start seeing dirt coming off of all of this. And if you look now underneath this surface, you can start seeing the shine of the paper is starting to come back. And it's a good piece of paper. There you go. I'll pull the lights down. You can start seeing the colors that were underneath it. All that haze is gone. This is also starting to help push the fibers back in place where the creasing is. It's also going to help roll these creases in place. And we'll get ready now to remove all the linen tapes that were underneath. And that's it. I'm going to be deciding how I'm going to be removing these particular mends. This is water activated, and it actually has like a canvas. Very, 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 so you can see how brittle and really strong these are. And it's moisture activated. You can see the adhesives here, but you can also see where it's starting to pull up. So what I'm going, and there's some holes. There's some extra glue. These are really old mends, and this is actually mucilage, which is fish glue. You can see the discoloration of these particular pieces of adhesives. These were before these, and they were pulled off, and that's why you get a little bit of a rough area. These are probably done, I don't know, maybe like 50 years ago, something like that. And these, I'm assuming, are going to be there's going to be really bad damage. These are new. This is new damage since these are put on. These actually cause more damage because This is stronger than the paper, so when people lift it, it doesn't rip there, and it actually gives way beyond these. So we have to see what we have here. Here we have a tear that wasn't addressed, and I can feel it underneath all of these. And what I'm doing is trying to figure out if there's any areas that have already released on their own, or if I'm going to have to go in there with the only solvent, which is moisture, because you just can't. Now here's one that's a little bit loose. And it'll all have to be addressed individually, and plus they're laying on top of each other. So what happens sometimes is after they're lifted, sometimes they're so fragile, the paper is so fragile it's already ripped, and I can see underneath it that I'm going to be losing some paper. So what I'm going to have to do is, yeah, they're really, really stuck down good. So what I can do is I can release where they're overlapping, because I'm just working with another piece of hinging material underneath it. And then where it hits the paper, I'm going to have to go in there and re-moisten it. But you can get an idea of the materials that I'm working with. So that's the bottom of it. They're all self-glued. They still make this particular material called, some of it is called hinging material. And it's not appropriate for papers because it's so strong. It's stronger than the paper that it's on. And you want your hinges to be less than that. So if you have any areas, if the paper's going to give way, you want the hinges to absorb the shock. You don't want the hinges to be so strong, or the mending material to be so strong that the paper pulls away and tears. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just going to be going around and just pulling up where I have overlapping adhesives, because I know I can't remove these from the paper. See, yeah, it's really, really soft paper. Can't do that. Just pull these back. So that's all that's what you do. These are really stuck. What we're going to be doing when we do remove these, the top of these things are impermeable to moisture. So if it had been a proper hinge or material that was used for repairs, it would have been Japanese paper, which is very, very easily removed with moisture. But with these, you're either going to sand down the top of them so that the moisture can go through the back, or we're going to have to slide moisture between the hinging material, this white stuff, and the paper itself just to get it to release. And I haven't decided yet how I'm going to do that. But it's really complicated. There we go again, it's starting to lift. So, that's all I can do there. Yeah, you can hear them pop off. See, it's easy to take them off. And as soon as it hits the paper, it starts pulling on the paper. So what I have here now is as far as I can go with this particular technique. The next thing I have to do is I have to go in with another technique with moisture to see if I can remove these. This is the end of this. 24 hours since the tapes were removed. And the tapes were removed by dry methods because the tape that was there initially was water soluble, and the only way I could have removed it was add more moisture. And when I did that, the surface was so powdery on this paper that it lifted it off onto the tape itself. So with a combination of different things, all of the tapes removed, and you can see they were removed quite easily and very nicely. Some areas were totally loose, and when I removed the tapes, the entire section was stuck to the tape. So we have areas like this, which are actually the sections of paper that came off with the tape. And you can see there's a few areas that actually have some pigment. Here's a little piece of, this actually goes up into here. And then you'll see some large pieces of paper that actually fit into these corners. And then there are actually missing areas that were always missing that we need to address as well. But that is going to be paper pulp, so we don't have to worry about that. So these are some of the areas that were removed. And then we also have sections of tape like this, where the tape was removed safely around the edges, and then the loose area that was attached to the tape and not to the art anymore were left on these papers as well. And all of this has been retained. And what's going to happen is, now I'm going to take all these pieces of tape. They're going to be submerged in water, and when these become loose, they'll be lifted off from the tape and then numbered to be placed back once again into the areas that were missing. These are the tapes that were removed. They're all just submerged in water, and they're the tapes that have just a fine coating of paper that was left on the tape itself, because I didn't want any of the adhesive that's on the tape to touch the paper anymore, because it's very destructive to paper. So I rather would have it removed dry and then remove any paper filaments that are left, tiny dust-like bits of paper that were left are now going to be removed. They will be soaked a little bit longer than they are now, but you can see the very fine bits of paper that are only left on the tapes, like this. This is the back of the tape. See how it's swelling with just water? And what's going to happen is, I'm going to come back very shortly and remove all those tiny bits of paper, make a slurry out of them, make a pulp out of them, and then the paper pulp will be pounded back into place and beaten into place with Japanese brushes, just the way regular paper is made, and then we'll have a fill of the same paper that was there initially. The other thing that's being done is all these creasings are going to be removed. We can't lose humidity because these papers are so susceptible. We're going to be using a technique. The Japanese use all these, and these are called Japanese rolling beads. And what they are semi-precious stones. I like to use rose quartz. And semi-precious stones will actually get warm with just the warmth of your hand. Actually transmits into the beads and it warms them. And you put your palm on them, and you have to work very slowly and a very light touch, and you work very slowly over all the creasing. And because the beads warm, you actually can roll out a lot of these creases. And this will all be done at a later date, but this at least will show you the technique of Japanese rolling beads. They're very lovely. So that's going to be done as well. So what I've done is rolled out areas with the Japanese rolling beads at this point so that I can show you a slow repair. And a slow repair is a repair that's done with Japanese papers and a blended ethylose pH neutral adhesive. And what I'm going to be doing is showing you how to repair like a large tear like this. Now this whole area was surface clean dry. So what we're going to do now is choose our Japanese papers and apply them to the tear. What I've done here is put weights, and these weights are actually going to hold the paper so they don't shift when I do the tears. Normally I do repairs from the visual side, the image side up, so I can align the tears. But these tears are so severe and so brittle, you can see how far they go, that these major tears have to be addressed first before I can come in and start working with the minor tears. So what I'm going to show you today is actually how major tears are repaired. Now I already have, like I said, cleaned them. The edges have all been called burnishing. And I'm going to start laying in the first repair. And this is all Japanese paper with a really great adhesive on it. And you'll see all the edges have been feathered. And feathered edges are so that when I flip this over after it's been repaired, you won't see any sharp edges. You'll just see the way the paper fibers blend right into the paper itself. They're called water edges because we actually lay water into a crease and then pull them apart, and that gives us great feathered edges. So I don't have to dye this to match the paper at this point because it's on the back. But if it wasn't on the back, I would have dyed this paper with some special dyes that I have so that it would absolutely become invisible. So this is what you do when you're actually strengthening. I see a lot of weaknesses, so that's why the repair is so wide beyond the tear itself. So you can see how that falls into place right like that. Alright, I've made some more hinges and mending, and I have to go beyond this one little hole that I haven't hit yet. So I'm just lifting it up. Make sure all the areas are very strong, so I'd rather do crossovers as long as we have very nice feathered edges. It all blends in very nicely. I'm going to catch this area right here. You can see how nicely this paper is just fabulous. And the last one I'm using, we're going to start crossing over some of the areas that we're missing. And then the missing paper will be added on the top of it on the flip side. So this is just going to be the base that we're going to start putting major repaired onto. Just stabilizing the paper at this point. These are removed. And this is the fabric that nothing will stick to. And that's laid on top. blotting paper that's going to absorb any moisture. Lay it on top of that. Glass slabs are all fitted. Make sure I've gone as far as I have to with the mends. And on top of that, we put flat weights. And these will sit for 24 hours. These will sit for 24 hours, and then tomorrow I'll start building together more of the tears in the same methods. Well, we're back on the All Together poster that we were working on before. And it's several days later, and I was able to remove all the tapes that were on the verso of the piece. It's already been hand cleaned. All the damage has been repaired with handmade Japanese papers. In this case, they're white. In this particular corner, since we had a large loss, I used hand-dyed different kind of Japanese paper so that we can start building a lost corner. And you can see the way the color is pretty close to our loss area. So what I'm going to do now is do an overlay over this damage to cover up all of this. And what I've got here is a piece of matched Japanese paper that's going to be laid on top and matched into this loss area here. And you can see it matches pretty closely. And what I do is, instead of using a pencil to outline it, I actually use needles to tap out, lay it out here, and then I tap out the outline that I'm going to be used. If you look really closely, you can see all the little needle holes. And that's the outline of the lost piece that I will be adding. I'll then use water brush to use, it's called water tear, and I add water along these dots. When I pull the paper, I'll get long fibers, the way this has long fibers, and then the piece will be just added in over the top of it. Another thing that's very important is to document all losses. And this is an indication of how I document losses. They're actually drawn out, hard copy, and I use them for indicators, notes that I need to help me to design the type of repair I'm going to do. And you can see in the corners I have complete loss. Down around the edges down here, I'm showing some tears and some other losses. This actually is the area that we're going to be working on today, where it has loss. These are the papers that were removed when the tapes were removed. These came loose. They were never attached to the art itself. They were just stuck to the heavy tapes. And every one of these will be replaced. And as you can see, we even have a little bit of pigmented pieces. They all need to go in place. And for anything that's left over and open, loss areas, after all that's been set in, then I'll use some of this pulp dust And this was the dust that came off of soaking the pieces that you saw the last time that was in a slurry. Now it's dried. These will be rehydrated into a pulp, thick pulp, and pounded back into the loss areas. Another way that I do repair losses is actually do a thin overlay of color. And that's done by using various kinds of Japanese papers that are hand dyed to match the outside paper as well. And these are you can see, very, very slender pieces of very thin but very, very strong Japanese papers that are, when I do them, I make them darker at one end, lighter to this end, and this is another piece that's a little bit darker, and I'll be matching them up to the particular pieces. They look a lot darker when they're on a white board. When I move them to the artwork, you can see there's a, they do change color. So then you just pick the best one and you begin your overlay system. The last thing that I'm going to show on this piece is how to do an overlay for a piece of paper that's missing from an image. And we're going to be working on this area here. What you're seeing is actually the Japanese paper backing, the pear, and it's giving me a base for to work on. There's many, many ways that I could get this to look like the original surface. I could just in-paint it, or I could just leave it alone. But I really feel like it has to be addressed because it's quite obtrusive to the eye. After I do the in-painting, this will all be in-painted the red. It'll feed right up to this mark. So we really need to address this particular problem. So what I'm going to be doing now is showing you the papers that have been dyed to match. And I dyed these different kinds of papers. And these are all beautiful Japanese papers, and as you can see, it's lighter here and it gets darker as it gets to this corner in here. And what I do is I just lay the paper next to the loss area and I sort of shift it around until I get to the place where the colors pretty well match. And I know it's too dark here, but as I bring it closer to where it's lighter, you can see where the colors match, and you've got to look, through to the back, to the white backing as well, to get an idea of what it will look like over the white. What you're seeing in the paper itself, these are called chain marks, because these are all handmade papers. I've chosen a paper that has a lot of snap. You can hear it. And that's so that when the surface is laid down, it'll give the illusion of looking like the clay paper. It'll have the like surface of the clay paper. Well, what I've done is I've actually gone and I found the paper that the color that matches pretty well to that hole. I've used the pinprick method of piecing out the missing area that I've just showed you. And I've done it with two pieces. This is the pinprick. You can see where I did a water tear. You can see all the feathered edges. The feathered edges are needed so they blend in well with the loss. And these are the two that I decided to try. And you can see they're quite different in color. This one, I think, is a little too dark that we worked on, but you can see the way it fits. Actually, it goes like this, upside down. See the way it fits? I think it's a little too dark. So I discarded it. It'll be used someplace else. And then I pulled one of the lighter colors to fit right in. And I really think that is a great match. And you can see that after it's all adhered, see the way it adheres, that it'll blend beautifully. And if there's anything that's left over as far as toning it, I'll do that with pastels, because there's a lot of stains and a lot of cracks throughout. And if I don't match the stains and the cracking, then you'll have an area that actually looks too perfect. So what I may do is actually take a piece that's actually darker and go over the top of it, maybe like this, so that it won't look as perfect. It'll have like a deeper stain in it. But that'll have to be addressed later. Right now, all I'm going to do is actually place this in the loss area, put weights on it, and let it dry overnight. What I'm going to be showing now is actually the repair of a creased area. And if you look at all of this white, this was a very, very bad tear. And it goes into the image, all through here. And what I'm going to be doing is in-painting the loss areas. And in-painting is a term used by conservators, and it indicates that color is going to be added to the lost areas only. And it's going to be only in areas that you see the white in. So if I do my job right, you won't see the white anymore. You'll see a continuous image. So you just use tiny little feather marks, and it probably will take 2 or 3 passes, so it won't be absolutely perfect the first time. You want to build small bits of color. These colors are all reversible. They're special fused dye colors, they're called, that are pH neutral and will not darken with age, so that later on my mends will not become visible. They also look a bit darker when they're wet. So what you're doing now is just blocking it in. I actually have some green in there. I also use special lights that help me to translate the colors properly. So then when they're exhibited under different light sources, my in-painting will still match. So I'm going to do a little bit of green over the tops of these, and you'll start seeing it disappear. Takes about 24 hours for these undercoatings to change to nice dry colors. And then I'll go back over them again. These were printed in several different layers of color built on top of each other. So that's how you have to lay your colors in. It's one color on top of the other. And you can see where it all started to disappear. And block it a little more. We'll let that dry. See the lines are starting to disappear. Can you see over my shoulder all right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first coat. Well, right here we have the finished piece of All Together. It's been float mounted to their rag board, and I'm going to be doing the last viewing of the piece for inpainting and any adjustments in color that needs to take place. I will view it the way it'll look hanging on the wall. And so the first area we're going to work with is the area that I did all the inpainting in, and that would be this area right here, right in this area where all the major cracking was. And I check it through, and I see that this little tear repair is a little on the light side. So I think I'm going to go in there and just break it up a little bit. Once again, I have a French pastel. And I'm just going to break it up, just a touch. There you go. And that's completely gone. A lot of the wear creasing I'm going to leave. You still see a little bit of the creasing in it because it is an old piece. And that just shows how it's the authentic nature of the piece itself. The other area I'm going to work on is the inset that we discussed. And the inset is right up here, goes from here to about here. There's the inset that we worked on. And that actually looks pretty good to me. We have some nice creasing in here. I'm going to just dab a little bit in there. There's a little color here. I'm going to just dab it. Do a few more lines in there. It's a little bit too perfect. I'm going to break it up a little tiny bit. There you go. And that side's done. Now I'm going to go to the other side of the piece for a close-up, and we'll see what's over there. See if I have to touch up anything over on that side. Okay, now I'm finishing up on the other side of the artwork. And we're going to work in the area where we had the loss. That was called the inset that I did. This is the indicator of our loss area. The loss area is right in here. And that corresponds with this area up in this corner. That was the fabrication that was taken care of. So I'm going to check it again to make sure that it fits pretty well where I want it to be. The inset actually goes from here all the way across here, cuts off at about here. You can see a little bit of an embarkation here between the inset and the paper. I'm going to stain it actually a little bit deeper. It's a little bit too clean. I'm going to put a little more stain in it. Once again, all reversible. Even if I wanted to remove the inset, I'd be able to do that as well without harming the artwork. And this is a little getting a little bit gold. I'm going to put a little bit of gray in there actually to kind of tone it in just a touch. It'll make a big difference. There you go. This is the inset from here over, and it's pretty good. I like the way it looks. Very, very strong. It has hinging probably every 2 inches around the entire length of the piece and the width of the piece. So I know it has a great deal of support. All the edges from this far into about here have been lined with Japanese papers, so that again it makes it very, very strong. And as this paper hangs in its frame, it's going to move and shift a little more than it is now. So it'll shift a little bit down, and it'll shift a little bit to the edge this way as well. So we're done.